Under a sky thick with stormlight, Ethan Cole checked the perimeter traps along the frozen ridge. The mountain night bit at his face, raw and sharp as glass, but he moved with the steady rhythm of someone who trusted the wilderness more than people. His cabin, a squat structure of pine and steel panels, waited below, half buried in snow. To the untrained eye, he was a recluse, a man gone feral after years in the wild. But Ethan wasn't hiding. He was surviving the only way he knew how, alone, alert, and always prepared. Inside, the cabin glowed with the muted orange of a single lantern. He laid his rifle on the table, cleaning it by habit. Every motion precise. Every click and wipe meant to quiet his thoughts. He'd been out here 3 years since the army discharged him, too restless for a desk, too haunted for a town. Solitude made sense. The forest didn't lie. The wind didn't pity. The dark didn't judge. He poured a small cup of black coffee and glanced at the clock. Midnight. The kind of hour where time froze and the world whispered things best left unheard. Then came a sound that didn't belong, a low hum, distant but unnatural, like electricity vibrating in the bones of the earth. He set the cup down. It rippled once on the table. Ethan stepped outside, the cold slicing through his shirt. The hum deepened, rolling through the valley like thunder with no storm. He scanned the horizon. No helicopters. No engines. Then the tree line lit up with a bloom of blue-white fire. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't anything he'd ever seen. The air trembled. His skin prickled. He tried to move, but the light surged, washing everything in brilliance. His body went weightless, his rifle tumbling from his hands. The mountains folded away, swallowed by silence. When sound returned, it was wrong. Too clean, too even. He opened his eyes. A sterile glow flooded his vision, white so bright it felt cold. He was lying on a metallic platform, restrained by bands of transparent material. The air smelled of ozone and something chemical. His heartbeat hammered, but his breathing stayed slow. Panic never helped. Observation did. The room curved like the inside of a pearl, surfaces seamless, alive with soft pulsations. He flexed his fingers, the restraints shifted but held. Gravity pressed faintly, weaker than Earth's. No seams, no doors, no visible exit. He counted the seconds between each flicker of light, cataloging pattern and frequency, something to anchor his mind. A sound clicked overhead. Then they appeared. 3 figures, tall and narrow, gliding rather than walking. Skin like translucent marble, bones faintly visible beneath the surface. Their eyes, black pools rimmed with pale fire, moved without blinking. They wore no clothing, just bands of faint light running along their limbs. Their movements carried the clinical indifference of scientists, not hunters. Ethan watched as one leaned close, studying him. Its face was featureless except for those eyes and a small slit that pulsed where a mouth might be. The creature emitted a sequence of tones, pure, harmonic. Another replied in deeper frequency. Machines embedded in the walls responded with gentle chimes. They didn't fear him. They didn't even see him as dangerous. That, he realized, was their first mistake. He tested the restraint again, subtly twisting his wrist against the material. It stretched minutely before tightening, reacting to movement. Organic tech. Responsive. Possibly bioelectric. He could use that. Maybe. One of the creatures produced a device resembling a crystal rod. It hovered inches above his chest, bathing him in shifting light. He felt a pulse ripple through his skin, data collection, maybe scanning. His muscles tensed, but he didn't fight it. Let them think compliance meant weakness. A panel descended from the ceiling, projecting holographic data in glyphs he couldn't read. The tallest alien, their leader, he guessed, observed the display with fascination. Its voice resonated through the air like a tuning fork. The others nodded, recording something. Ethan studied their reactions. Curiosity, precision, hierarchy. He'd seen it before, in human scientists dissecting a trapped animal. He understood now. They'd taken him because they could. They expected fear, confusion, maybe screams. But all they'd find was calculation. The leader gestured, and one of the others touched a glowing node beside the platform. The restraints released. A moment of freedom, and then an invisible force shoved him upright, holding him in midair. The alien stepped closer, its face mere inches away. Ethan met its gaze and saw his reflection distorted in those black eyes. To them, he was data. To him, they were an opportunity. The alien emitted another harmonic note, lower this time. A translator embedded in the wall flickered to life, outputting a rough approximation of English. Subject stable. Primitive musculature efficient. Neural patterns complex. Ethan's lips curled. Glad you think so. The alien paused as though uncertain whether the sound he made was communication. Then it turned to its companions. Auditory mimicry observed. Not mimicry, Ethan muttered. Understanding. They didn't react. They never would, not until it was too late. The leader pressed another sequence on the crystal rod, and Ethan's body dropped back onto the platform. Restraints returned. He waited, breathing slow, eyes half closed. When they left, the chamber dimmed. Only one figure remained, tending to equipment near a control node. Ethan focused on its movement, the rhythm of its limbs, the frequency of its steps. It adjusted instruments, then placed the rod on a tray. Its hand lingered near a series of symbols glowing in a soft amber hue. The alien pressed one, and the restraints around Ethan's right arm loosened slightly. Maintenance sequence, maybe a calibration. That was enough. He flexed his fingers, slipping them just far enough to test the gap. The restraint quivered. The alien didn't notice. It was humming now, a vibration in the air. He twisted his wrist sharply, forcing blood to thin against pressure, and slid free. The momentary release stung like fire. The alien turned, sensing movement. Its black eyes widened fractionally, a flicker of something Ethan might have called surprise. He froze, pretending to struggle as if caught. The alien tilted its head, stepped closer. He studied its approach, its height, the distance between its limbs. He could already see a dozen ways to kill it, with the rod, with the restraint strap, with his bare hands. But he didn't move yet. Not now. Not while he knew nothing about where he was or how many others existed. When the creature leaned close to secure the restraint again, Ethan whispered, just loud enough for himself to hear, "You made one mistake." The alien paused, the sound not quite reaching its understanding. It turned slightly, confused. "You think I'm the experiment?" Its eyes reflected the faint light as it hesitated, an instinct older than language telling it something was wrong. But before it could react, the chamber door, if it could be called that, opened with a hiss. The leader returned, gesturing the subordinate away. Ethan went limp again, expression empty. The aliens resumed their study, oblivious to the silent resolve hardening behind his stillness. He closed his eyes and listened. Footsteps, hum, pulse of energy from the walls. He memorized every pattern. When they left again, the rod remained on the tray. Still glowing. Still within reach if he could just loosen one more restraint. He opened his eyes to the pale ceiling, every muscle tight with purpose. The fear had burned away. All that remained was focus. They thought they had captured a man. They didn't realize they had brought a predator aboard. And for the first time since he woke, Ethan smiled. Ethan woke to the low hum of machines and the faint pressure of containment around him. The restraints were gone, but his freedom was an illusion. He was inside a transparent enclosure, its walls shimmering faintly like heat waves. Beyond them, the alien chamber stretched wide and silent, lit by veins of blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. He sat up slowly, cataloging every detail. 3 exits, 1 observation panel, no visible guards. The air was warmer, almost humid. They'd changed something in the atmosphere, testing his adaptability again. He stood, palms against the smooth surface of the barrier. The wall gave slightly under his touch, elastic but firm. Not glass. Some kind of responsive field. He pressed harder, felt resistance shift, then harden. It learned. Adaptive containment. He smiled faintly. Everything alive had limits, it just took time to find them. A tray slid silently through the wall, phasing into his space. It carried a block of translucent substance that glowed faintly, like jelly infused with static. Food, or something like it. He sniffed it, tasted a flake, and grimaced. Minerals, protein analogues, trace metals. It was nourishment, not cuisine. He ate anyway, methodically, saving a third of it for later. Hunger wasn't his enemy, predictability was. Hours passed, if hours meant anything here. The aliens watched from beyond the glass, their faces unreadable. Sometimes, a metallic arm descended to measure him, scan him, inject him with bursts of faintly warm light. Ethan endured, outwardly compliant, inwardly taking notes. The instruments, the rhythm of observation, the time between feeding, all routine. Routine meant pattern. Patterns could be broken. When they left him alone, he moved. Slow, deliberate. The dried remains of the food block were tacky, adhesive when pressed against the wall. He kneaded them between his fingers until they stuck to his skin, then pressed them into the corners where the barrier met the floor. If it reacted to bioelectric charge, he might be able to confuse it, make it think the enclosure was intact when he stepped through a weakened point. It was theory, but theory was where survival began. He paced the enclosure, breathing evenly. His reflection followed him, gaunt face, sharp eyes, short beard gone ragged. Every time he met his own gaze, he remembered something from before, nights spent teaching recruits how to survive in the dark, how to read silence like language. Outlast them, he used to say. The first to panic dies first. The memory steadied him. A shadow moved beyond the glass. The leader again, the one he'd begun to call the Watcher. Its movements were slower than the others, deliberate. It placed one long-fingered hand against the barrier, almost like curiosity. Ethan mirrored it, palm to palm through the translucent wall. The Watcher tilted its head. Maybe, he thought, it was beginning to realize he wasn't a passive specimen. Maybe curiosity cut both ways. The barrier shimmered, and a section of wall dissolved to form an opening. The Watcher gestured, a motion halfway between command and invitation. Ethan hesitated, feigning confusion. Two more aliens appeared behind it, carrying slender rods pulsing with faint light. Non-lethal restraint tools, likely. He stepped forward, eyes flicking to their weapons. The Watcher emitted a series of tones, his translator device on the wall crackled. Locomotion assessment. Cooperative behavior stable. They wanted him to move, to test him in a new environment. He played along. The corridor outside was cold and endless, walls rippling with faint internal light. The gravity here fluctuated slightly, he adjusted instinctively, walking with the balanced rhythm of a soldier trained for variable terrain. The aliens led him past a series of sealed chambers. Inside each, other shapes moved, creatures he didn't recognize, breathing in strange rhythms. He caught glimpses of scaled limbs, wet eyes, twitching antennae. Experiments. Not prisoners, subjects. He looked away. They entered a circular room dominated by a column of shifting light. It rotated slowly, its surface etched with geometric patterns. Energy readings danced through the air in thin threads of color. One alien motioned for Ethan to stand in the center. He obeyed, letting them believe his submission. A hum rose around him, low and resonant. The light climbed up his body, scanning deep, probing nerve and bone. It wasn't pain, it was intrusion. He clenched his jaw, steady breath, unmoving. The Watcher observed from behind a console, its gaze locked on him with scientific fascination. The scan pulsed once more, then faded. Primitive neural efficiency exceeds projection, the translator said flatly. Subject displays adaptive patterning under sustained observation. Ethan opened his eyes and smiled faintly. You have no idea. They didn't understand the words, but the tone must have registered. The Watcher's head tilted slightly, and for a fraction of a second, the air between them thickened, recognition, challenge, something primal. Then the aliens turned away, voices flickering in layered harmonics. They left him in the chamber, the barrier sealing behind them. He stood motionless, studying the central column. The light that powered it seemed organic, pulsing like the heart of the ship itself. The walls carried faint condensation from the humidity in the air. Condensation meant moisture. Moisture meant conductivity. Conductivity meant possibility. He walked the perimeter, touching every seam he could find. His fingers came away damp, slick with faint residue. He crouched, dipped a finger into it, tasted. Metallic. Electrolytic. If he could redirect enough of it, maybe the energy barriers could short temporarily. Not now. But soon. He waited. The hum of the room shifted tone. He felt it more than heard it, an energy fluctuation. They were changing the ship's internal settings for their next phase of tests. He'd seen enough. He crouched again, removed the bit of dried food from his pocket, and pressed it into the corner where condensation gathered. Then, with slow precision, he rubbed his hands together, gathering sweat and residue, forming a crude paste. He smeared it along a small section of the wall, marking the spot. Later, that would be where he'd push. When the wall opened again, he walked back into his enclosure without resistance. Compliance was camouflage. They guided him in, the barrier solidifying once more. This time, he didn't lie down. He sat against the wall, breathing evenly, staring into the faint reflections beyond. His mind mapped every route, every corridor, every detail he could remember. The aliens thought they were studying adaptability. What they were really studying was their own vulnerability. He began to hum softly, a human sound, low and rhythmic. The room seemed to react, lights dimming slightly as if confused by the unfamiliar frequency. He smiled. Even their ship could be unsettled by noise it didn't understand. He wondered how they'd handle chaos if it wasn't part of their experiment. Hours, or cycles, later, the Watcher returned alone. It approached the barrier and observed him for a long time without movement. Then, with deliberate slowness, it reached out and touched the same spot on the wall as before. Ethan mirrored it again. This time, something faint rippled between their hands, like a static pulse. The alien jerked slightly, startled. Ethan leaned forward and whispered, "You feel that? That's fear. Get used to it." The Watcher stared at him for several seconds, unmoving. Then it turned sharply and walked away. The lights flickered once, almost imperceptibly. Ethan exhaled, leaned his head back against the wall, and closed his eyes. The plan was taking shape. The patterns were clear now, shifts in light every 2 hours, food delivery after each scan, one maintenance interval where the barrier weakened just enough. He'd learned their rhythm. When the chamber dimmed again, the sound of machinery softened. Somewhere deep in the ship, systems cycled down into what passed for night. Ethan flexed his fingers, his muscles coiled and ready. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was adapting, studying, waiting for the moment to turn the cage into a weapon. And when that moment came, he promised himself, the hunters would finally understand what it meant to trap a human being. The ship was silent when Ethan made his move. The faint hum of power that normally filled the corridors had faded to a low pulse, signaling the maintenance cycle he'd been waiting for. In the dim blue light of his enclosure, he crouched beside the marked corner where condensation collected. The barrier shimmered faintly, weakened by the humidity and his earlier residue. He pressed his palm against it, steady and deliberate. The field resisted, then flickered, just once, like a breath caught mid-motion. He grinned, pushed harder, and stepped through. The barrier flexed around him, rippling like water, and then he was outside. Free. The air here was cooler, sharper, filled with the hum of distant machinery. He crouched low, listening. The corridor beyond was empty. The aliens trusted their containment too much. He began to move, barefoot and silent, each step measured. The floor vibrated faintly beneath him, a living ship, pulsing with its own heartbeat. He kept to the shadows, navigating by instinct and memory. Every intersection was catalogued from his hours of observation, 3 left turns to the scanning chamber, 1 downward corridor to the energy core. He needed tools, leverage, information. He wasn't escaping blind, he was hunting in someone else's forest. A faint glow ahead marked the approach of a patrolling alien. Ethan flattened himself against the wall. The creature moved gracefully, unaware, its translucent skin shimmering in the blue light. It carried one of the crystalline rods he'd seen before, stun weapon, most likely. He waited until it passed, then moved behind it with a predator's patience. In one swift motion, he wrapped his arm around its neck, locking his forearm under the creature's chin. It thrashed silently, claws scraping uselessly against the metal. He tightened the hold until it went limp. He dragged the alien into a side alcove, laying it down gently. Up close, the creature looked fragile, veins glowing faintly, skin too thin for a world like his. He took the rod from its hand and examined it. No trigger, just a pressure plate and a shifting light along the shaft. He pressed it once. The air around the tip distorted faintly, heat-bending space. Energy discharge, low level but lethal at close range. He'd seen weapons like it in human labs, experimental, unstable. He smiled. Perfect. He slipped into the corridor again, moving faster now. The hum of systems deepened as he neared the ship's core. The architecture changed, walls more angular, light more intense. He passed a chamber where two aliens communicated through vibrating tones, unaware of him beyond the doorway. He paused, memorizing their patterns, then continued. His goal wasn't escape anymore. It was control. If he could reach the command systems, he could force the ship to reveal its location, or destroy it from within. The idea didn't scare him. It was a plan. A purpose. Something to hold on to in the emptiness of captivity. He turned a corner and froze. Ahead, a massive window opened into black space, stars scattered like shattered glass. Below, a planet rotated in slow silence, its surface veiled in green and gold clouds. He wasn't in orbit around Earth. The realization hit him with the cold clarity of truth. He was farther from home than any human had ever been. But instead of despair, a strange calm settled over him. The distance didn't matter. The rules of survival didn't change with the stars. Movement reflected in the glass. Another alien patrol approached from behind. He pivoted, pressing himself against the edge of the frame as two of them passed, speaking in rapid harmonics. He could almost sense the rhythm of their speech, measured, mathematical. Predictable. When the second turned its head, Ethan moved. The rod flared once, silent and precise. The creature fell without sound, its body collapsing into stillness. The first spun, too late. Ethan struck again, the energy pulse carving a charred line across its chest. Both bodies twitched, then stilled. He crouched over them, steadying his breath. The smell of scorched air lingered. Guilt didn't come. Survival didn't leave room for it. He dragged one body into a storage alcove, covering it with a sheet of reflective material. The other he left as a warning. They'd find it eventually, and panic. Panic would be useful. He pressed forward, guided by the low hum growing stronger. At the end of a narrow hall, he found what he'd been seeking. The energy core, a vertical shaft of rotating light that pulsed through the ship like blood through veins. Transparent conduits surrounded it, carrying streams of glowing fluid. He approached cautiously. The energy radiating from it prickled against his skin, humming in the bones of his teeth. Control panels lined the walls, etched with alien glyphs. He studied them, trying to decode pattern and function. The language was geometric, but its logic felt familiar, shapes for sequences, curves for commands. He began pressing symbols, observing reactions. One triggered a surge in the core's brightness. Another dimmed the lights. The third released a deep vibration through the ship. He stopped, memorizing the sequence. That vibration could be useful, it felt like an emergency alert. Sudden motion to his left. He turned just as an alien entered, taller than the others, armor-plated, its veins pulsing brighter. Authority. This one wasn't a researcher, it was a soldier. It saw him, emitted a sharp, resonant tone that made the panels flicker. Ethan dove behind a console as a beam of light cut through the air where he'd stood. The energy rod in his hand hummed alive, its heat searing his palm. He rose, aimed, and fired. The bolt struck the wall beside the alien, leaving a molten scar. The creature advanced, unflinching. It raised its own weapon, a staff that shimmered with concentrated energy, and swung. Ethan ducked under the arc, feeling the blast singe the air above him. He lunged forward, ramming his shoulder into the alien's midsection. It staggered back, hissing in a tone that rattled his bones. He struck again, this time targeting its throat, the same weakness as the others. The alien caught his wrist, strength immense, and twisted. Pain flared up his arm. He drove his knee upward, connecting with the creature's lower abdomen. It faltered. Ethan wrenched free, swung the rod upward, and jammed it into the alien's chest. The energy discharged in a flash of blue-white light, throwing both of them backward. When his vision cleared, the alien was still, its chest cavity burned open, its light extinguished. The smell of scorched ozone filled the chamber. Ethan staggered to his feet, chest heaving. His arm trembled from the impact, but he was alive. The ship's hum had changed, deeper now, unstable. He looked at the control panels. The vibrations he'd triggered earlier were spreading, cascading through systems. Lights flickered red along the corridor. An alarm, alien and haunting, filled the air. He moved quickly, pressing new combinations, trying to override the lockouts. Symbols scrolled faster, their glow frantic. One display resolved into a crude map, an orbital diagram, 3 celestial bodies, a trajectory line pointing toward the planet below. Escape pods clustered near the aft section. That was his way out. But the alarm had drawn others. He could hear them now, distant but closing, the scrape of feet, the harmonic cries echoing through corridors. He took one last look at the energy core, now pulsing erratically, and whispered under his breath, "Let's see how your gods handle chaos." He ran, boots thudding against the metallic floor, red light strobing across the walls. Every motion precise, every turn remembered. The ship trembled around him, systems struggling to stabilize. He could feel the pulse of its heart faltering. He passed the bodies of the 2 aliens he'd killed earlier, their luminous veins flickered dimly, then went dark. Ahead, the corridor split. He could see the pod bay, sleek vessels nested in alcoves, their surfaces reflecting the emergency lights. But between him and freedom stood a cluster of alien figures, 5 of them, weapons drawn, eyes blazing with cold luminescence. Ethan stopped, breathing steady, weapon raised. Behind him, the energy core roared like thunder, the sound of a dying giant. He smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth curling with something that wasn't fear. Round 2. The aliens advanced as the lights flickered, the ship groaning under its own failing systems. Ethan took a step forward, ready. The predator had found his hunt. The ship's alarms wailed through every corridor, a chorus of mechanical panic echoing across the alien vessel. Red light pulsed in frantic rhythm, washing the metallic walls with the color of blood. Ethan moved like a shadow cutting through chaos, focused, efficient, alive in a way only danger could summon. The aliens closed in from both ends of the corridor, their weapons raised, their voices a discordant storm of tones that trembled the air. He didn't wait for them to act. Humans never did. He fired first. The alien rod in his hand flared, discharging a beam of raw heat that tore through the nearest creature's chest. The others scattered, their movements elegant but predictable. He ducked under a bolt of violet energy, feeling its heat kiss the back of his neck. His return shot cracked through the air, shattering a control node and filling the hall with sparks. The sudden smoke blinded them, but Ethan had already memorized every detail of the terrain. He charged through the confusion, shoulder-checking one alien into the wall before driving the weapons but into another's throat. It collapsed with a strangled hiss. He reached the pod bay, lungs burning, mind clear. The escape pods gleamed like metallic seeds, embedded along the curving walls of the chamber. A translucent barrier sealed them off, pulsing with soft blue light. He scanned for a control panel, found one half buried under a fallen beam, and began tapping symbols. The interface responded with resistance, locking him out again and again. He pressed harder, frustration edging into his calm. "Come on," he muttered, "you built this thing out of arrogance, there's always a back door." Behind him, the sound of movement rose again. He turned to see them, 3 remaining aliens, led by the one he recognized instantly, the Watcher. It moved differently now, posture lower, its luminous veins pulsing violently with each breath. The expressionless calm from before was gone. This was no longer an experiment. This was a fight for survival. Ethan lowered his weapon slightly, meeting its gaze. "So," he said, voice rough, "we're both learning tonight." The Watcher's voice emerged through the translator, its tone sharper, broken by interference. "Human, anomaly. You destroy balance." Ethan took a step forward. Balance is a luxury for the ones who've never had to fight for air. The Watcher lunged, faster than before. Ethan barely dodged, the alien strike grazing his shoulder and searing flesh. Pain flared, but it sharpened him. He countered, swinging the energy rod in a tight arc that smashed into the alien's forearm. The weapon clattered to the floor, skidding across the metal. Another alien fired from behind, the blast seared past Ethan's ear. He dove, rolled, grabbed the fallen weapon, and fired back. The beam hit the shooter full in the chest, burning through. The Watcher roared, a deep, resonant vibration that rattled Ethan's bones. It charged again, faster this time, grabbing him by the throat and slamming him against the wall. The pressure tightened, his vision darkening at the edges. Ethan clawed at its arm, gasping, until instinct took over. He drove the stolen weapon's sparking end into the alien's side. The explosion of light and heat blew them apart. He hit the floor hard, gasping, chest heaving. The alien staggered, its chest flickering with dying light, but it didn't fall. It turned toward him, still moving, relentless. Ethan forced himself up, pain screaming through his shoulder. The Watcher lunged again, and this time, he didn't resist. He sidestepped just enough, grabbed the alien's arm, and used its momentum to hurl it into the control console. Sparks erupted. The console shattered. Power arced through the air, searing both of them. The Watcher convulsed, caught in the electric storm, and collapsed. Its glowing veins dimmed one by one until only darkness remained. The hum of the ship deepened, trembling beneath his feet. The damage was spreading. The energy core he'd sabotaged was failing, cascading power surges across every system. The lights flickered from red to white, then to a sickly green. The translator crackled overhead, structural failure imminent. Containment breach detected. He turned back to the console, blood dripping from his fingers, vision blurred by sweat and smoke. The alien symbols blinked in rapid sequence. He recognized one, the same command used earlier to lower barriers. He pressed it. The translucent field over the pods dissolved with a whisper. The ground shook. Somewhere far below, a muffled explosion rippled through the structure. He stumbled toward the nearest pod, ducking as a beam tore loose from the ceiling. The pod's hatch opened with a hiss, interior glowing faintly with pale light. He hesitated only long enough to glance back at the fallen Watcher. "You should have left me on my mountain," he said quietly, then climbed in. The hatch sealed. The pod's interface came alive with alien symbols scrolling across the display. He didn't need to understand them. One icon stood out, a spiral leading downward, away from orbit. Escape sequence. He pressed it. The pod shuddered, detached, and was swallowed by the black. Through the viewport, the ship receded, a vast, luminous leviathan breaking apart piece by piece, its elegant geometry collapsing under the weight of its own hubris. Flames and energy bursts bloomed in silence, scattering across the stars. Ethan leaned back, chest rising and falling in rough rhythm. His reflection in the glass looked different, scarred, hollow-eyed, alive in a way that defied explanation. He thought of the mountain, the cold air, the solitude. The wilderness had always been his teacher, but this was evolution. The pod jolted violently as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Fire streaked across the window, orange and white ribbons tearing through the black. Heat built, metal groaned. Ethan gritted his teeth, gripping the seat. "You made it out of worse," he muttered to himself. "You'll make it out of this." The pod broke through the clouds, trailing smoke. Below, the planet stretched endless and strange, oceans of glass, forests glowing with bioluminescence, continents shaped like broken shards. It wasn't Earth, but it was solid ground. He'd take that. The pod struck the surface hard, skidding through alien sand before coming to rest against a ridge of dark stone. Silence returned. Real silence. No alarms. No hum of machinery. Just wind. He unbuckled the harness, pushed open the hatch, and stepped out into the unknown. The air was thick, warm, faintly metallic, but breathable. The sky above shimmered green and gold, streaked with the debris of the ship burning in orbit. He watched it disintegrate, the final sparks fading into the atmosphere. For a long moment, he stood there, letting the alien wind wash over him. He felt small again, but not weak. He was alone on a new world, wounded, unarmed, and human. Yet somehow, that felt like an advantage. He looked around. The landscape stretched for miles, jagged rock, patches of glowing moss, distant shapes that might have been ruins. He picked a direction and started walking. Every step was a promise, he'd survive this world too. Behind him, the last fragments of the Tyrikal vessel burned out against the sky. Ahead, the horizon glowed faintly with unfamiliar light. Ethan tightened the strap on his torn jacket and whispered into the wind, "You wanted to study humanity. Congratulations. You just unleashed it." And as the alien dawn broke across the ridges, the man they thought was a specimen walked forward, not as a survivor, but as the beginning of something far more dangerous.